In this video, we're going to talk about the critical mindset shifts that you have to have in order to build a successful coaching business, especially in today's massively disruptive and highly competitive marketing world. And most of us as coaches, we don't have this business degree. So you have to understand the business side of creating a coaching business. And most of us, frankly, don't. One of the key principles in this discussion is that perfection is the enemy of excellence. Such a disruptive concept according to the way that we're generally programmed and according to the way that most coaches try to build a business. So you got to understand that that is not the way to operate. It will shut you down. It will create too much pressure. And you've got to be liberated from all of the normal restrictions that most of us have when it comes to business. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about the 3 business models that are out there, and you have to understand which one is right for you. And most people actually fail because they're asking the wrong questions, or they don't know what category of business they're in. Therefore, they don't know what to do to get to the next level. We're also going to break down the 7 gears of a business and why the middle gear is by far the most important one. And that's the one that relates to you. Now, if you're new to the channel or you don't know me very well, my name is Sean Smith. And for the last 15 plus years, we've been certifying hundreds of coaches in our certification methodologies. We've trained thousands of coaches around how to build successful businesses, especially the mindset of what it takes to succeed, not just in this coaching industry, but in today's hyper-competitive marketing world. Now, you're going to want to stick around all the way to the end and get the whole conversation. It's going to be massively valuable. It's going to apply to so many different areas of your life and your business. And you're going to get a survey that you can take that will allow you to know whether your business will be around or not in 2 years from now. Because if you're not doing the foundational principles that are required for a business to succeed, then you have to make those shifts. So get out a pen and pad or however you take notes. This conversation has many layers and it's going to be massively transformational for your business. Welcome to this transformational conversation. And I know this is going to be a really powerful conversation for you, especially anybody that's in business or anybody that's ever thought about being in business. Chris McIntyre is a deep, profoundly wise businessman. But the wisdom is really in about the human inside of the business. Chris opened up his first business back in 1995. So you started young. Were you in elementary school then, I think, right?
That's right.
And he's been in the business game for a long, long time and really learned through action and a lot of missteps and a lot of failures and a lot of getting punched in the nose is one of the things that I've heard him say many times. And he really understands the value of true business experience and not just business theory. He's built several businesses, sold several businesses. He is on the council of organizations, and he's an official member of the Forbes Coaches Council, which is not an easy thing to be a part of. And more than that, Chris is just a great man. And we have such a cool relationship and an interesting one. You know, Chris reached out to me a little bit less than 2 years ago. And so we forged a relationship. And at that time, he was looking to hire a business coach, and he ended up hiring me. And as we did a lot of the work together, I hired him right back because of all the work that I knew that I needed to do and the content that he had. And Chris has forgotten more about business than I or many people will ever know. So Chris, thank you for being willing to come on here and share some of what you know. And I know that's going to be extremely valuable for people.
Well, Sean, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm excited to spend some time with you, and I'm excited to spend some perspective with the coaches, the business owners that your tribe touches on, and a lot of the folks that I've had the privilege of getting to meet and enjoy that have kind of invested with me. I really love the opportunity to kind of serve and to be helpful. The thing with business that so many people misunderstand, or sometimes just haven't had the opportunity to have someone explain it, is it really is, in a lot of ways, it's a lot simpler. I didn't say easier, but it's a lot simpler than a lot of people would know or might guess. I've had the opportunity to begin a few different businesses. Actually, you're right, it has been several, but there's been some pronounced larger businesses that I've been able to be involved with, and as those grew, the amount of change that it required from me in my thinking, in my actions, in my execution, in my interactions with others, and to share some of those things in such a way that people can say, hey, I relate to that. I get that. I understand that. I really feel like that often there's a wall of misperception about what it takes to be, this word, successful in business. And often, as I said before, it's a lot simpler. A lot of times it's a lot less glamorous than what a lot of people are kind of looking for, thinking that they're going to hear and find.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I like the most about you, is that you're real and you're honest. And so Chris has a coaching company. It's called Seventh Gear Coaching. And if you're watching the video, you can see the gears in the background there. And he's got an entire framework around the 6 elements, the external elements of a business. And then the 7th gear that's right in the middle, that is connected to all the other gears, is the human in the middle of it all. And I appreciate that you just opened up, talking about that. And one of the things that I've learned from you is that if you build a business that doesn't take care of that human in the middle and give that human the ability to live the kind of life that that human really wants to live, then what's the point of having that business? And I know you wrote an article, I believe, and one of your statements is business is personal. And I think that goes against what a lot of us talk about in terms of like, don't taking things personal and so forth. So I like the way that you attack it head on. And inside of that human element is all the emotional stuff. So, in these conversations, I like to just start with a word or a concept and then just see where it goes. And what you just said a moment ago, before we even started the recording, is the perception deception, or not perception, the perfection deception.
Yeah.
And I've never heard you put those 2 words together. It's super powerful, and how perfection is the enemy of excellence. And I remember you were sharing this with me on one of our calls when I was the client, and just really profoundly shifted my way of thinking. So let's unpack that and start there.
Yeah, you did it. You did a really good description of the business framework, and just to touch on that for a second, what I've done is I've taken the different arenas of every business and reduced those to a real simple model, and just to run through them. Marketing. Every business really needs to have marketing, sales, fulfillment, which would be sort of a fancy word for deliveries, right? And then there's management. Management has 2 pieces: management of ourselves and management of others. Then there's operations, and operations includes processes and systems. And sometimes those are informal, unwritten, and made up every time. And sometimes they're very, very formalized and very specific and very easy to reproduce. And then finance, which is just taking care of the money, taking care of the took-ins and paid outs. And so I've arranged that in a model of 6 little gears, 6 little hubs that every business has. And every business owner needs to pay attention to. And that person, that human that's in the middle of those 6 gears, that's the 7th gear. And that's what I've named my business for, because that's my focus. It's on the person, it's on the human, it's on that man or woman that's sitting in the middle of their business, sometimes drowning, going, how do I make this work? And to cast vision that's more clear, to say, okay, let's just divide all these up categorically. But this particular topic, if I had to pick, which I usually do, uh, what category, what gear does this apply to? I would say it's right in the heart of it. It's the seventh gear. It's a combination of the management gear, which would be the fourth one as you're coming around the face of the clock. But when we're talking about the seventh gear, we're talking about the person. When I get to meet with my clients and we talk about things like, okay, what are you working on? What are you doing? And what kind of things are giving you friction, or what kind of things are working well? After the first few meetings or first few sessions, we kind of lay out a course of what we're going to be talking about. We don't always finish, right? And so, the next meeting, I'm looking at my notes, we pick up there, but there's always the opportunity for one of the clients. I said, listen, is this how you want to spend your time today? And that's something that one of my clients actually taught me accidentally. Is he had been in a coaching relationship before, and he said, I just wasn't feeling like they were listening, and I didn't feel like my particular situation was always what was on the agenda. I was like, wow. And so I took that note to self, and I just said, okay, here's 2 or 3 things that we have been talking about, but how do you want to spend your time today? And he said, well, I need to be honest and tell you this homework assignment. And he's working on a position binder, which is basically for one of the positions in his business. It's the job description. It's the checklist of duties that goes with it, and then a description and process for those things. So it's not, I've never found myself excited to do one of those. I've always been excited to have them done, though, because that's nice. And he said,
and the level of freedom that gives us, especially those of us that are creators, I think that level of freedom is so powerful to have that tightened up.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Because once it's defined, once it's refined, once it's reduced to kind of writing, it can be delegated because it can be measured. And that gives so much freedom from the oral tradition where most business owners say, well, I'll just tell them how to do it. That's fine. But you're going to live in the land of Mondays where you're always going to have to tell people how to do things. And that's fun for the first 3, 4, 5 years. But then after that, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doomed to a destiny of repeating myself. And who wants to live that way? I mean, it's fun for a while if you have an overinflated ego, which I often do. And hey, it's the Chris show, but I didn't realize I was going to have to play that show again and again and again and again. And so
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that are viewers of my channel and followers of my work, we, including myself, we didn't grow up with a business acumen. A lot of us, we had this great experience in personal development of some kind. And then we heard that you could actually do this as a business. And then we just kind of back into the idea of building a business, but it comes from this desire to just help people. And while that's very admirable, and there's a lot of talk in this industry about being driven by that service mentality, I think from a business standpoint, what makes you so valuable in the work that you do is that even if you're driven to serve people, there still has to be this business foundation. Mm-hmm. And if there's not, then all the drive in the world to serve people is not going to go anywhere. And I know I kind of jumped in on you when you were talking here, but the more that you're talking about business, and I'm looking at your framework right here, we'll put that graphic up on the screen. Yeah. What's so powerful about it, number one, it just looks cool, right? The branding and the lettering and all of the coloring and all that.
And who helped me with that?
Yeah, some guy with a really cool hairdo is what I heard.
That's right.
That middle gear, that seventh gear, and there's some cleverness in there. You got the 7 inside of the light bulb there, but that middle gear is everything. And what I love about this framework is to the right side there, you can see the external business activities, the marketing that you spoke to, the sales, the fulfillment of whatever it is. And that's what a lot of people think is basically all that building a business is, because that's all we see
That's right.
as customers. Therefore, we just think we're going to emulate the way that we experienced another business. And especially if that business is also in the personal development field, which isn't really big on teaching traditional and solid foundational business principles. But those three on the left side, the internal business activities, the finance that so many of us are scared to touch because we have an unhealthy relationship with money, and the operations that is so left brain that most of us don't really like putting time into building those binders and so forth. And then the management piece, I've never liked managing. And so it's those three foundational pieces underneath the three external points, but then all revolving around and then being driven by that element in the center. I mean, the first time you shared any of this with me, I know you remember, I hope you remember, I was just like, man, you get it. And I knew that I was a customer as soon as we were talking, because I knew I need all of this. And I had been in business for 14 years at that time. And I recognized how simple this was and how much I was never taught. And you have such a powerful way of just explaining it in a simplistic way. So I just wanted to give the viewers and you know, the listeners, if anybody's listening on audio, the simplistic framework here that all businesses need. And you might not like one of these gears, but that doesn't change the fact that your business needs it. And for a long time and in various places in my journey, I've put too much energy into one or two of those gears and essentially let the other ones go into atrophy because I didn't want to touch them. I didn't know what to do. I didn't enjoy certain pieces of it. And my business suffered because of it. So I just wanted to dive into your framework because of how brilliant it is. And then my invitation to anybody listening or watching this is see yourself in this framework and see where you need support. And I'll actually just ask you to share this now, Chris, while we're on it. Chris developed a really powerful quiz survey, a diagnostic tool that essentially says, give me 2 minutes or answer these questions. Here it is. I'm looking at the website now. Take this 2-minute survey and I'll tell you if your business will be around 2 years from now.
That's right.
Anyway, you can take that wherever you and I know.
Yeah, I'd like to invite anybody that has some interest in that. You know, the right kinds of questions are so valuable. And, you know, I've set up some questions in each one of these gears, just as a diagnostic to be able to show you, hey, listen, here's how you score sort of analytically in these different areas, in these different arenas. And that begins to lay the groundwork for a roadmap of saying, okay, here's where we're strong, here's where we're weak. Here's 2 or 3 things that for me, I say, hey, these are priorities. However, how do you want to drive this? How do you want to drive this ship? Because the objective here is to get to the point where we're in that 90% proficiency, efficiency in these different areas. And why 90% is important, and that's going to bring us to the subject of today, is that 90%, it really begins the realm of excellence. And it's not perfection. I don't expect myself to get a 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100. Like, for example, in this diagnostic, 7 areas of questions. Somebody could, get, 10 points available. Somebody could get a 70 here, let's say. But really, people begin to be in the excellent range when they're in the 62, 63 range. And that's the objective that I have for my clients, is to get them to a level of excellence, not perfection.
Before you go any further, Chris, into the perfection, which I think is so critical, I just want to give a real big plug to the quality of that diagnostic tool. So any of you that are interested in finding out how your business stacks up, or if you're relatively new in business, to give yourself a little bit of a preview of the things that you're going to want to focus on to create a foundational business, just taking the survey itself by itself, just taking it will give you this experience of what you need to focus on and where you might be weak or vulnerable in your business. So I highly, highly suggest all of you at the very least take the quiz so that you can get a sense from a really, really deeply powerful business wisdom perspective where you are, and then see if your business is going to be around in a couple of years.
Well, that's right. That's sort of the question of, why do we, my passion so much is for business and for business people, right? There wouldn't be business without people. And the way that I look at this country, it's exciting to me that someone can decide, hey, I don't want to work for the man or the woman. I don't want to be part of the system. I want to create my own. And this idea and this potential and this possibility that we can actually, it's called chasing your dream. And I won't pick apart that definition too much, but with some, persistence and with some excellence and with some education and a whole lot of effort, you really can create a successful business. And I would even argue, that often you don't even need a great product or service. I wouldn't suggest it, but if you look at the tobacco industry, they go, well, what do we got here? I said, well, you can suck on it or you can smoke it. It smells bad. It tastes worse, and it causes cancer.
It'll kill you at some point unless something else does first.
The marketing guy says it's okay. We'll just tell everybody it's cool. And it works, right? So, keeping in mind that the one gear that's not in the business model or the framework is your product or service. Because here's the thing I know, is that I expect, and I haven't been disappointed, that the individuals, the leaders, the owners, the entrepreneurs, they're subject matter experts on their products and services. They're a straight up 10 out of 10 when it comes to knowing their stuff. And so I don't coach on that. It doesn't, my clients are a huge variety. Some of them sell products, some of them sell services, airplane engines, software design. It does not matter. Some are more pure sales. Because the thing is, it's not about the product or service. What I'm talking about is the business framework, and that's consistent no matter what business you're in. And so it puts us in the position of talking about principles, things that work, how to do things, what things to do. And
let me add the other side of that, because the vice versa perspective of that is, if your service, for those of us that are in the personal development world, we teach life lessons or how to, make money or how to lose weight or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. Your service can be the best in the world at what it is that you help people with. And without these business principles, essentially it becomes, borderline useless, because people don't know irrelevant. About it.
That's right.
Right. So those principles that you're talking about, if they're missing, then the most valuable thing in the world doesn't ever get consumed, or it never gets, experienced by people.
Right. It really becomes a disservice. And if you think about that and let that land, if you're not going to do it well, and if you're not going to do it right, and I say right, please take that with a little bit of leeway. But if you're not going to do it in an excellent fashion, you're really going to disappoint yourself and a whole lot of other people in the process. So
I want to highlight that. If you're not going to do it right and you're not going to do it well, from a business standpoint, it's a disservice to your value.
Right. It's a disservice to your clients, your potential clients, your employees, your potential employees, to yourself, to your family. And again, there's a lot of different ways to sort of skin the cat, but what I feel very safe doing and what I feel very excited doing is talking about principles. Because
Yeah.
the one, the one thing for example, the story that brought this up most recently with a client is, as I was asking him, okay, here's 2 or 3 things that we've been working on. What do you want to, how do you want to spend your time? And he said, well, I need to be honest, the projects and work, tasks that I had set out, I said I would do, I didn't do. I was like, okay. He goes, well, it's really frustrating. I said, yeah. And I'm just kind of, yeah, okay, got it. I'm not upset. Doesn't bother me. I'm not making mean faces at him or anything like that. He goes, well, it just, a lot of stuff came up. And so he's offering excuses to an argument I'm not making. And I just let him go for a second. And he goes, well, it's just, I know what I'm capable of and I know what I should be doing. And it just seems so frustrating because I can't get it all done. I said, yeah. I said, yeah. And he goes, well,
that's going to land with a lot of people right there.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And then he said something that was, just a red light went off above of my head. He said, well, I just really, as that happens, I just feel like such a failure. And I said, wait a minute. There's a difference between failing and being a failure. And he's like, well, yeah, it's just that, man, here's what's funny. He goes, well, you just strike me as the kind of guy that's really on top of all of this. And I said, oh, okay.
You haven't fooled, apparently.
That's right. All right, we'll work with that. But as that conversation went on, it's not a new concept for me because it falls in what I call a 90% rule. A conversation came up in our household, which is just perfect. My wife is a student. She's working on our master's right now, and she had just finished a test. And she said, she turned it in online, and she goes, well, I'm nervous. I don't know how I did. And I went, I'm sure you got an A. Yeah. And she said, of course, yeah, I'm right. And she said, well, I just don't know if it's a good A or not. I went, oh, a good A.
A good A.
That's an interesting conversation. And so I have 5 kids, and 4 were living at home at the time of the conversation. And one of my sons said, a good A. He goes, the best A is a 90. And she said, no. She said, I think, good A is like 98. And that's code speak for, she really thinks it's 100, right?
Right.
A perfect score is the best A. And now I tend to side a little bit with my one son that said, 90. I said, well, what I've learned is that I'd kind of go for a 93, maybe 94, because stuff goes sideways, and I need a little bit of cushion with that. So I get where you're coming from, and but I would modify the answer to say 93, 94, and that feeds into this because when you think about school, and let's talk about that grading system, A, B, C, or D, right? What does it take in your experience to get an A? What's the minimum threshold?
From a percentage standpoint, or like the 90%?
Right, 90%. Yeah. And so if we get a 91 or we get a 98, we get an A.
It's all A's, and it all counts as a 4.
Yeah, it's a 4-point
report card. System. Right.
That's right. And so what I want to encourage people to think is to be thinking in that 90 percentile. Not to shoot for the 90 because you might only hit the 85, but to look at it and say, okay, in business, excellence is very important. However, we've heard that phrase, good is the enemy of great. And I agree with that, because good in this setting means, that's good enough. That's what the implication is, that it's average, it'll get by, it'll do. But I think that's not good enough. In my opinion, in my experience, I think it needs to be excellent. However, there's something that there's a phrase for this, the point of diminishing returns, right? Yeah. Meaning that as we get closer and closer to the perfect standard of, let's say, 100%, it takes an inordinate amount of energy and effort and resources to improve something that's running at a 93, 94, 95% efficiency up even 1%. But the problem is that there's a perfection deception, meaning that there's a pervasive thought. And what my client said to me that brought this to the surface was, if I don't get 100% of my things done, then I've failed.
I failed. Yeah.
If I
It's all or
don't
nothing.
get it perfectly completed, then I failed. Because anything, when we set our sights on 100%, whether intentionally or subconsciously, that's always going to involve failure. And the problem with the word failure, and the way that he used it, was, I feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I feel like I failed. That's a lot easier to process. There's a little distance there between your quality and worth as a human and your performance in any given day.
That's huge.
That's where, that word fail and failure has so much emotional baggage that the cumulative effect of failing every day is that we begin to feel like a failure, because what we're doing is we're comparing our frustrating reality, our low light reel, with what we imagine everyone else's highlight reel is.
Yeah.
Because when we think about successful business people, we think about the people who have multi-billion-dollar businesses. And I want to say, hey, Elon Musk is a genius. I have no problem with that. I don't think anyone else does. And I can't emulate him. Now,
right.
I'm sure he's got his own issues, right? Bill Gates, Bezos, all of these titans of industry that we're looking at going, hey, I want to be like that. And I say, you know what? Let's do this first. Why don't we look at how we can be excellent in all of these gears? Not perfect, but excellent, which means we're in that 90 percentile. I shared something with my client. I said, when, in my most recent business that I sold a few years ago, we would do over 1,000 applications for new clients in a month. And in our world, that was a lot. However, between 6 and 7% of our applications that were turned in, submitted to us, never got approved.
Okay.
Never got approved. And one of the kisses of death is when an application comes in incomplete. Oh my gosh. I coach salespeople. Get it right the first time, spend the extra time. It'll pay huge dividends if you'll take that extra time with paperwork, because everybody knows that salespeople love paperwork. Right. No, they don't, right? But the thing is, I said between 6 and 7% of our applications. So in a month that we do 1,000, that's 60 to 70. Let's call it 65 applications, which is more production than most offices in that industry ever did in a month.
Right.
So point being, I said, as long as it wasn't more than that, I was okay. I would look at it as a key indicator, and we were in the excellent range. Our production was high, but I learned that if I tried to get that to 5%, 4%, 3%, 2%, or hey, I want to get them all done. You know what? That's not realistic. That's not excellent. That's not profitable for a business, because really, running a business isn't about figuring out how to do everything perfectly. It's about how to get everything done in an excellent fashion. And there's two big shifts there. It's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about getting everything done excellently. Excellent. Getting everything done means I don't have to do it. I just have to make sure it gets done. But I need this standard of excellence. You should have no apologies for excellent service. You should have no apologies for excellent products. Now I say no apologies. What do you mean? I said, well, 90% of the time, you shouldn't have to apologize. If I can get it right 90% of the time, let's go to Vegas, okay? I'm willing to apologize the 10% of the time that things don't go properly. I'll work to get it right, but there are times, and in this example, 6 to 7% of the time, we just weren't able to get them, completed. But as I looked at it over the weeks, months, years, decades, I was like, that's a pretty good number.
Yeah.
So when I would look at it, and when my client said, so 67% of your, he goes, well, what was wrong with them? I said, oh, all kinds of stuff. And I started asking questions. I said, here's the thing. I'm going to shortcut it all. It doesn't matter. Because 93% of the time, we got it right. And it was more than anyone else.
Yeah.
So we had a reputation for excellence, but that excellence had failure as part of the daily plan.
So that piece right there. So excellence includes failure.
That's right.
But perfection obviously doesn't.
It does not.
To, I think, loop it back to something that you said, just so I'm clear, this is what you meant, that striving for perfection is what gives us or puts us in that realm of diminishing returns, because it's not possible.
That's right.
Not realistic. But in our strive for perfection, we're actually putting resources or energy or maybe even money or emotion in an area that's
time,
keeping us
money,
from
effort, emotion into something we can't have.
Into something we can't have. That right there. Into something we can't have. So how much more time and energy and resources are we going to put into something we can't have?
Yeah, it's not worth it to our business. And most of the people we're trying to do it for don't care anyways. Not at that level.
All right. They don't care. So it's not realistic. It's irrelevant. They don't care anyway.
Right.
And that's what most of us are focusing on.
Yeah. I saw somebody
that's a nice little slap in the face.
Week. They said, perfection is a procrastination strategy. I went, oh yeah, it is. Because the thing is that we can wrap ourselves up in busyness, trying for perfection, and torpedo our business. Because if you want to have an excellent business that's repeatable and scalable and ultimately saleable, if you want to sell your business, I'm not advocating that you do that, but I will tell you that the path to scaling something, the path to really enjoying something as a business is learning what are the processes. I can't grow it if I can't define it, because I wouldn't know if it grew or not. Right? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
I can't grow it if I can't define it, because I wouldn't know if it grew anyway.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. And there's so many of us, again, in this industry that haven't been taught these principles, or even if we've been taught, we don't want to look at them. Yeah. We don't enjoy looking at them. One of the things that you've helped me with over the year and a half or so, either officially on our coaching calls or unofficially just in our conversations, is that the things that I'm afraid of touching or looking at are, number one, a function of me being personally involved in them. Like you said a little while ago, I am a failure if something failed. But number two, this is what you've helped me with so much tremendously, is that that's just part of the game. Not having money is something that every business is going to go through at some point. And one of these gears falling down to the point where it actually jeopardizes a lot, and maybe even the life of the business, is just something that a business goes through just about all the time. And to your point earlier, we tend to think that all businesses, especially the ones that we see and that are successful, and I'm putting that in quotes because we don't know if there's a depressed or maybe even suicidal business owner behind the super successful multi-million or billion-dollar business. But we tend to think that a business that has become successful never had any of those moments where, they didn't know if they were going to be able to make payroll, or they
Right.
didn't know what was going to happen because somebody just quit. And now nobody knows what that person just, was in charge of, because there was no operating procedures or what have you. And so it's been really helpful for me to know that you, somebody I massively respect in business, as well as who you are as a dad and as a husband. And I've seen you in those roles. I've had the immense pleasure of having dinner at your house with your wife and your kids. And so I've seen who you are inside of all of this, and because of all of this. And so to hear you basically say to me, listen, man, that's just a part of it. Like there's so much more to put your time and energy into, has been extremely helpful, because it is easy for me. I think it's easy for a lot of people to think that I'm the only loser, right? I'm the only dumb one in the bunch, right? I'm the only one that has financial problems at times, or has management problems at times, or has stuff fall down. And here's the thing. This is what you helped me the most specifically with. If I was better, then my business would be better.
Right.
Man, I could feel the emotion come up even as I say that. Like if whenever my business is hitting roadblocks, then that means I'm a failure. And I mean, and I'm open with this, filing bankruptcy over a decade ago, like that wound is still accessible to me, and I can go there pretty quickly, and I can dive down that rabbit hole pretty intensely if I allow my mind to go there. And for you to constantly and when you catch me going there, for you to be able to just say this is a part of business has been so massively helpful, because I think it's so easy for us to go in on ourselves, to beat ourselves up, to say, this is my thing. If I was a better business owner, I wouldn't have had to file bankruptcy. If I was a smarter business owner, I wouldn't ever have the ups and downs. I would just have a hockey stick of a business consistently growing 70, 80% every single month. I mean, it's a simple thing to ask for, Chris. It's
You'd only be as good as Chrysler or
myself.
GM or any of these other massive reorganizations that we've seen. So yeah, that's right. We hold ourselves to this standard where, it's what's amazing.
Before you dive in, sorry to cut you off, but I just want to add this one piece. I see you, and I don't know that I've ever had these words specifically for you, but in this moment, I see you as an advocate and as a protector of the business owner, of the entrepreneur in the middle of the business. And man, do we need somebody advocating for us sometimes, and do we need people protecting us against ourselves? So that was super clean for me just there a few seconds ago.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
There's a huge amount of empathy that I have for the men and women that are chasing their dream, and that's a little romanticized, because there's times when it doesn't need to be our dream product, our dream service. For me, it wasn't. For me, what I didn't know is that I would be good in business. I had this conversation. In fact, it was just last night. One of my sons was running through. I said, "Have you ever thought about owning a business?" Yeah, he's a junior in high school. He said, "No." I said, "I think you'd be good at it." That's all I said, because he would. Now, a lot goes into that, but he's got the right sort of thinking. He's a competitive fellow. He pushes himself. He's got some talent. He likes people. People like him. There's a lot of good balance of left brain and right brain activity going on. And not to say that that's the only profile that can do it, but the thing is that these are real live people. And here's a fact: 90.7, 90.7% of businesses fail. They close their doors within 40 months, 40 months. That's 3 years and 4 months from the time they open. Almost 91% close their doors.
Wow.
And it's not because they didn't have a good product. It's not because they didn't have a good service. it's not because they didn't love their business. It's just they weren't particularly good business people. They didn't understand how to make the machine turn. They sometimes would mistake passion for product or passion for service or even passion for people, meaning that business will just take care of itself. This phrase, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe that's sort of the business plan of getting lucky. And I don't really place a whole lot of store in that. You know, I've never purchased a lottery ticket. And I have some friends that do that. And it's up to $2 bazillion. You got, I said, just odds are just so bad. I just don't feel good about giving my money for that. I feel like it's a tax on people who can't do math. So there's a logical enterprise with business, right? That says, okay, the product and service, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but let's just set it to the side and say it doesn't matter. Let's just assume that it's good. Let's assume that it's great. Let's assume that it works and does what it's supposed to do. But the thing is that if you want to get in line to be a business person, what's that all about? What does that require? Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't understand marketing, that's fine. You're going to have to learn that, or you're going to have to pay people who do, and you're going to have to get involved with that. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be excellent at it. You have to be really good at it. If hey, I'm not much of a sales guy, well, you're going to become one. Right? Because you need to learn that process. That needs to happen, because the customers aren't going to drive that. You need to understand how to drive that, and you can learn that, and that information is available. And when it comes to deliveries and I'm working my way around the dial, those three things, like you said, that's when you walk into the door of any business off the street. Those are the three things you see. You see the marketing, you see the sales, and you see the delivery right there. But those are the visible external business activities. But it's very much like the visible part of the iceberg. The big part of it that really has to go on, that makes a business sustainable and successful and scalable and even, again, saleable. That path to scale and sale is the same path. That's the bigger part of it, of going, okay, what does management mean? Well, like going back to the story of the problem with perfection, because here's what I want to ask you about your daily list. Does it have these 5 things on it? One mistake, one distraction, one meal, one break, and one funny conversation. Because if those things aren't on your list, you're kidding yourself. It's like in business planning.
Wait, but before you go on, can you say that list again?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's I've got to check my email. I got to check my voicemail. I've got to do this. I got to send this message. I got to call this person. I got these 3 meetings. Got this, that, and the other. But here's what my client was saying. But I had this thing come up, and it totally derailed my plans for the day. I said, yeah, that sounds about right. But here's the thing: is put these things on your daily list. One mistake. If you want to call it a screw up, I'm going to drop the ball at least one time, and it's going to make a noise when it hits. There's going to be one distraction. This thing happened I wasn't planning on. That's right. And a meal. It's like I'm personally bad about working through lunch, because I'm not hungry in the moment, but at 3 o'clock I'm hangry. Yeah. And I'm not thinking straight. So one meal and one break and one funny conversation. Do something that puts a smile on your face or somebody else's. And that begins to be a workable day, because when you have that on your list, now today can be successful. Because if the only thing on your list is everything that has to be done, or has to be, needs to be, want to get done, if everything goes right. If you ever watch the Shark Tank, I do like watching that show, because those business people all sit up there and they ask very predictable questions of these entrepreneurs. Hey, I got this great product, and it'll do this, and it'll do that, and do the other. And they say, okay, how much money have you got in reserves? They go, huh? They do that Scooby-Doo, I won't row, right?
Is that what I did the first time you asked me that as well?
That's right. Zoink, Scoob. What are we going to do here? Because there's basic things that you've got to be able to do. You got to fade some heat. I've been working on this concept. I haven't turned into a blog post yet, but it's why COVID is healthy for business. And people don't want to hear that. But here's what people are doing. They went through their bank account and they looked at every little thing and said, what can I do without? What money am I spending that I shouldn't? What subscription have I forgotten to cancel? Right? What projects did I have that I was either paying somebody to do or some resource or time? Okay, we got to jettison that. We got to throw that overboard because it's not paying for itself. And there may be some people that we have to say goodbye to because we can't afford to pay them. And that was unpleasant. But when I look at the reality of what's happening, the stress on the business that COVID created, well, it's kind of like in 2008, that was a really tough year. And in 2000 or 2001, that was a really tough year. So every 7 or 8 years, there's this big economic cycle that we go through. And this one has been the COVID, where it requires us as business owners to look at everything with a lot of scrutiny and say, what is our mission critical business that, offerings? What do they have to be? No frills, no chills. What's our core competency? What are we great at? What are we excellent at? So let's focus on that because we know that'll work for us. And let's get rid of distractions. Let's get rid of extra expenses. And there's people that are saying, I wish I had a war chest.
Yeah.
I wish I had my money saved because I didn't see this thing coming. Nobody did. And so, point to this is there's some basic things that we can do so my client said to me, he said, and I think this is okay because I'm not using names here. He said, one thing that, he and I are a similar age. And he said, every once in a while, I don't sleep at night. I was like, yeah, we're all getting old. And he goes, yeah. And the next day I'm just, I'm not worth much. I can't do the stuff that I wanted to do that day. And it's really frustrating. And I don't know why, and this, that, and the other. And I said, okay, all right. He goes, well, what should I do? I said, well, you're falling in the 90% rule, so you're fine. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, it's 22 business days in the average month. You just said 1 to 2 of those days, which is 5 to 10% of them, you're not going to be able to operate at peak efficiency. So sounds pretty good to me. Sounds excellent. So what I would do if I were you, over weeks and months, when reality happens, pay attention and work it into your plan, because your business plan needs to include, based on what you just said, is there's going to be 2 times a month where you don't sleep well and you're going to, not be functioning well. So on that particular day, what I would recommend is that you only do high priority items like, check your bank account. If you got to do payroll, take care of payroll. If there's any pressing, urgent, important, not just, but important things, do those in the morning, and at lunchtime, go home and don't come back for the rest of the day.
Wow. Because
that's reality. What you said is this keeps happening. And I don't want that to happen anymore. So I don't know what to tell you about that. But if you say it keeps happening, that means that's part of the plan. And if you keep ignoring it, leaving it outside of your plan, it's kind of like saying, I every 90 days, I get this surprise bill from the government and I have to pay my taxes. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty predictable. As a matter of fact, the percentages are pretty predictable. Instead of waiting, to feel surprised there, go ahead and put that money to the side each month. And so it's just there and ready to go. As crazy as that sounds. So when we have these things that are pretty persistent and pretty consistent variables, then they're not variables anymore. They need to be part of the business plan.
That's so good. Several things that you just said, like really, just really landed. Just 90%, okay. So you're a couple days, you're not your full self. That's great. You're still operating in that 90% zone. And obviously, as you shared earlier, so many of us are just expecting perfection. So here's a couple things that I'm acutely aware of in this moment. I want to do another episode with you, and I want to go around these 7 gears and really dive into them. Because I think it would be super, super helpful for everybody to see and feel some of the details and really get into the strategies and the things that maybe we don't know about, as so many of the things. I was one of those zoinks. What? When you mentioned reserves, but I'm happy to share this, right? I'm really happy to share this. And I think I told you a few weeks ago that because of your teaching me that I had never heard of, I don't think very many people in the personal development and the coaching space specifically would have heard of this. But because of that, I'm happy to say that right now we've got over 5 figures in an account in reserves.
That's awesome.
This war chest that you say, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, you should be.
We also didn't do it by putting all of it in an account. We did it by, per your guidance, taking a little bit here and then being consistent with it. And pretty soon I looked back and went, oh my goodness, look at what we've created. And so the point is, so much of this can be predictable success.
Yeah.
But you said something a few moments back too that I want to highlight. Those of us that are really good at something, because we're good at coaching, because we're good at teaching something, doesn't necessarily mean we're good at business. And I would say very, very rarely do those two things come packaged together. Mm-hmm. The good news is, if you're really good at what you do, it's easier to learn the business piece than it is to be really, really good at sales and business, which is what a lot of people in personal development think is what you need to be born with. It's easier to be a really good teacher and learn business than to be really good in business and learn how to deeply affect people's lives and be a really, really good teacher.
That's right.
And I'm saying that because I know who I attract. Right? I definitely don't attract the really good business people. I mean, you're actually one of the very first ones that I was like, holy cow, man, this dude is a really powerful person in business. And obviously there was something that we resonated, with, and I'm massively humbled by that. But most people that listen to me are sloppy and messy, just like me, but we're really good at something.
Yeah.
And we need to let ourselves off the hook for needing to be good at the things that we're just not good at, but we can learn.
Yeah.
And for that, I want that to be kind of a tee up to whatever this next episode is.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, putting you on the spot. Will you come back?
No, I'd love to.
Take us through.
Yeah. The encouragement is that this is a set of skills, and skills are things that can be learned and refined and improved upon. So there's nothing, there's really nothing, I don't want to say there's nothing mysterious about it. I want to say that there's absolutely nothing involved with any one of these components that a willing participant can't learn and become good at. I mean, really good at. You can't become excellent in. I'm not in the business of selling perfection, because that's a standard I don't hit, and it's a standard I don't think I can help other people hit. So it's really quite exciting. And I would, going back to something you said, I'm really proud of you. That's a big deal, because you earned it. There's certain lessons that we have to earn, right? We've talked about that before. We have to go through that process. We have to do without it. Sometimes we have to suffer the pain of doing it wrong, and having that ability to fade some heat, because there's downturns, there's mistakes that we make, there's things that we try that don't work out the way they're supposed to. There's people and vendors that we make arrangements and contracts with that they don't fulfill their part of it. Does that mean that it's okay? Yeah, okay, I'm going out of business because they didn't do what they were supposed to. Well, that's not okay. So we need to be able to fade some heat. We need to be able to fund the mistakes, because that's really, the the, the successful business is done not in the absence of mistakes, and it isn't necessarily in spite of all of the mistakes and errors and humanity. It's the most successful businesses embrace that. They embrace that with themselves, and they embrace that with the employees. A couple other examples I shared, and I want to be sensitive to wrapping up on your timeline, is that, like for example, our business was large enough that we had something, basically, we had a term called BICS, bottoms in chairs. And in like our call center that we had, I said, we had a 90% BIC rate. And what that meant was if 90% of our people were in attendance, we were good.
Yeah.
And if it got, and we had a run rate, which our sales staff had a national sales staff. And so I would tell the sales managers, listen, you want to have about a 95% run rate, because the sales appointments that were being run, if you're a manager and you look at your team and you've been given, let's say 50 selling appointments for the day, well, you're not going to sell any that don't get run, right? So if the meeting doesn't happen, the sale's not going to happen. I said, so you want to, out of 50, you want to make sure that 45 are getting seen on a daily basis and manage that large number. And yeah, there's going to be days, I guess, where you get all 50 of them run, but that wasn't what I was going for. I wanted 90%, because if you're at 90, 92, 93, the bigger the numbers get, you can play with the percentages. But the point is, you're falling in the arena of excellence. And if I'd had a conniption fit about that 5 or 10%, that would have been my focus. My focus would have been the failure, and I would have missed the excellence.
That's huge.
And when you're bringing other people in, as your organization scales, actually what happens is in a lot of ways you become less efficient. There's just you're like, for example, in the coaching world, one of the questions that, whether you're a mechanic or whether you're a coach or whether, a trainer or selling pizzas, it just doesn't matter. That proprietor, that owner is going to have this thought of, no one can do it as well as I can.
Yeah.
And you know what? You're right. And that's not even the point. But if you have processes in place that allow people to do it 90% as well as you do, without having to have all the experience that you have, now you're scaling. Now you're multiplying. And you start looking at that going, okay, wait a minute. So that means as soon as I have 3, 4, 5 people, and I'm not in production, but they are, on that margin of difference, that's where your provision comes from. That's where your value, that's where your income comes from. And that's when the company begins to be profitable, and that is in that replication. But what I hear from people saying is, well, I'm looking for somebody just like me. And I'm, oh, there's your trouble.
Right.
You don't want somebody just like you, because I couldn't hire somebody like me. I'd have the worst employee and the worst boss, right? It just would never work. It would never work.
That's the truth.
What we need, people, is that can do the job and will do the job, 90% as effectively as we will. And if they do better than that, that's great. But if your expectation is perfection, even in management, that's going to be frustrating.
That's a really powerful concept. And I think a good place to put a pin in the conversation, and we'll pick back up in another episode and really dive into the specifics of a lot of these, of all the gears, really. And I know it's such a missing piece for entrepreneurs in general, but definitely people in the coaching industry, people in the personal development industry that just simply don't have these business skills yet. But what I love that you said is we can all learn them. And I'm a walking example of that. And much of that in the last year and a half has been because of you and your content. So thank you for that.
Well, you did the work, right? You did the work. I get to talk about things, and I appreciate that, but I'm not willing to accept credit for that. So good job yourself. I'm glad we had a constructive conversation or two, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Chris and I could probably go back and forth on who's gotten the better deal of client, right? So I just appreciate who you are. And again, thanks for sharing your knowledge so effortlessly and easily. And I can't wait to have another conversation and really dive into these 7 gears.
Well, sounds great. The
Yeah.
pleasure's been mine. Always glad to help and serve.
Cool. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Now, if you like this video and you want more specific tips on how to start a successful life coaching business, go check out that video right there. But in reality, if you try to fit yourself into a box that's not you, it wasn't created for you, it doesn't have your name at the top of it, that's the best way to guarantee failure.